When you start learning and loving Jesus, it's not necessarily this overt, explicit sin. It's a thing that might be good, but then it becomes God.
Right.
And then somehow, subtly over time, the order begins to shift. And that's when you realize, here I am, finding myself worshiping anything or anyone other than God. I leared that I wrestle with idolatry. I know. It's what everybody wakes up thinking about one day. I really thought I was a good Christian girl and I loved Jesus. And I learned at this point in my life that the more I know about God, the longer I walk with him, the more subtle my idolatry. And so I was a runner my whole life. I mean, starting age 12, distance runner, miles, high school, summer college. I loved it. And I remember when I hit my 30s, my knees did not love it anymore. And part of it was because I had grown up running. So most marathoners and distance runners start in their adulthood. If you grow up while your bones are forming, right, it has, right? So anyway, I go to this doctor and he's like, well, you kind of moving towards stage 2 arthritis in your knees because of, your cartilage is low, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm a problem solver. So I was like, okay, next, what do we do about that? And he was like, well, you need to stop running. That's not the Lord. What's the next step? So he was like, or you could have surgery and knee replacement, you're going to be back. And then, I was like, there's got to be a way. And so I really tried to figure out a way that I could keep running, and I could not. So I had to stop running. And it was a pretty abrupt stop. And so I would run 10, 15 miles. And he was like, you can probably run a mile or two. So I was like, you telling me that I can't eat a gallon of ice cream.
And that's nothing for you, though.
So I was struggling, and I'm gonna tell you, this was such an eye-opening experience because I could not really figure out how to stay fit. I love running and fitness and sweating and working and all that stuff, and I couldn't figure out anything because running produces such high endorphins and high cardio. Everything else, swimming, everything else felt like this. First of all, it requires equipment. I'm a black girl. Getting my hair wet is not the business with swimming. What's happening? So I really was in a struggle, y'all. And it wasn't until about 8 months in, I was newlywed. And my husband was like, are you depressed? I was like, I don't get depressed. I don't do that. And I really had to wrestle with that. And I was like sad. And it was one of those eye-opening moments where the Lord just impressed upon me. He was like, you are sad because you are missing the thing that you worshiped. And I started looking back over my life for years. It had been such a coping mechanism that it had crept out of the scope of fitness and health to when I'm upset, I went for a run. When I needed to deal with conflict, I went for a run. When I was feeling stressed, I went for a run. And
no chocolate chip cookies, no ice cream, you went for a run.
I went for a run. Now, that does not mean that chocolate chip cookies may not have been a reward after the run, but it was really an outlet. And I started realizing I had more consistent running time than quiet time.
Wow.
I really did, because I had to get up early to get all that in to get my day going.
I want to introduce you to an amazing organization that Matt and I just love. It's called Mercy Ships. They're the largest floating civilian hospital in the world, staffed by generous doctors and nurses who donate their time to bring life-saving medical care to those who otherwise would not be able to receive treatment. Their newest ship, the Global Mercy, is joining their fleet, creating urgent need for more volunteers. You don't have to be a doctor or a nurse to serve. There are many other positions on the ship that are desperately needed, including cooks, cleaning teams, and more. It's easy to get involved. Just visit mercyships.org for more information.
And y'all, me and I don't know if you can have a come to Jesus meeting with Jesus, but that's what happened. And so he was like, I need you to see that you've had this creep of what this thing has meant in your life. And now who are you in the absence of this? What do you love? All those things that you resolved with the run, you should have been coming to me anyway. And y'all, it just blew my mind because I was a church girl. So I was like, no, idolatry means, like this overt worship towards some other spiritual things. He said, no, idolatry is anything that makes me not first place. And so it was such an eye-opening moment for me. It changed the way I see God. It changed my relationship with him. And it increased my awareness on all these other little things that our culture, our good things, marriage, kids, church service. I can prioritize church over God. Sometimes we feel more guilty about missing church than we do about not listening to God or spending time with him. And so that has been a benchmark in my life that I always go back to. Every time I start wondering and trying to give myself too much credit, that of course I worship God. And He's like, you know, is it really? And so I think it's something that ties in very much to the holiness of Him, because that awe is where the devotion and it's not songs, right? Worship is devotion.
Right.
It's energy, priority, passion, what consumes me, what I go to first. Right. And that has been a big shift in my life as God has started to kind of weed out the subtle idols that I've built in my life that even on their own could be good, but should not be God.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's good.
Absolutely. Well, because I think, you know, we get so consumed in the activity of worship instead of the posture of our heart in worship. And if the motive of your heart is to worship God, you're not going to bring Him scratch and dent sacrifices. That's why He says, you bring me the first fruits. He is absolutely transcendent. Right. So we're not appeasing God. We're going, goodness. We're awed by God. But that kind of smacks me upside the head, because I've got several things I go to, and there's times I delude myself and saying, God gave me this as a stress release instead of, no, He gave you Himself as a stress release. If these things are first,
right, because there's nothing wrong with the thing. Sometimes when you start learning and loving Jesus, it's not necessarily this overt, explicit sin. It's a thing that might be good, but then it becomes God. Right. And then somehow subtly over time, the order begins to shift. And that's when you realize, here I am finding myself worshiping anything or anyone other than God.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe today and you'll never miss a new upload.
And don't forget to check out our Better Together shop. Thanks for being a part of our community.